I'm back with another book review. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Now, this video is going to be focusing on all the YA novels I read recently in the last week of March. I did a fairly good job at tackling some books that were been on my shelves for a long time, and also a lot of the arcs that I haven't had a chance to read from last year, and I'm excited to talk to you about them. I have to say, overall, my ratings for these novels are not that great, and I wasn't too happy with some of the reads. But for the reads that I was very happy about, I did end up giving 5 out of 5 stars. So I'm happy about that part. You know, you win some, you lose some. And if you guys are new to these videos, basically what happened is that I read 60 books in March. There is not enough time for me to film a whole video on all the 60 books. I figured shorter videos would be better than a super long video where I wouldn't have time to discuss more in depth about the book. So I figured shorter videos would be better for you to watch as well. So this just happens to be my young adult wrap up for March. And if you guys haven't watched it already, I should have uploaded my romantic comedy wrap up. So if you guys haven't, I'll definitely leave the link down below for you to check it out. So let's get started with the young adult novels that I read. So the first novel that I read is actually a book that was sent to me from Simon Schuster Canada, and this book was sent to me for a Bookstagram review tour, and the book is called What I Like About You by Marissa Cantor. And a little bit backstory about Marissa Cantor is that she is actually a book publicist. She has been working in the publishing industry for a decade now, so she knows her stuff, she knows social media, and this book truly reflects her knowledge of the book industry. So this book follows a girl named Hallie, and Hallie is a book blogger, but she is an anonymous book blogger. She makes cupcakes that look like the covers of the novels, so she got really famous over it, and she has a huge following. I think she has like around 100,000 followers on Instagram, and a lot of people reading her blog for recipes for cupcakes. And she decides to move to a small town in Connecticut to take care of her grandfather, who just so recently lost his wife, which is just so happens to be her grandma. She was very close with her grandma, and she's very sad about the passing, but she figured that family should stick together, and that's why she moved to Connecticut with her younger brother to live with her grandpa while her parents were away in Iran to shoot a documentary. Her parents are wealthy and rich. Just think of like Brad and Angelina, and they're just famous celebrities. And so that is another reason why she kept her secret of her identity on her book blog, because she doesn't want people to think that she's only popular because of her rich and famous parents. So when she moves to Connecticut and she just so happens to bump into her online best friend at the library, things start to happen and things start to unravel, because suddenly she's stuck between two lives. She's stuck on a life where she has an online personality where she's Kels. She's very sassy, she's very popular, she always knows what's the perfect thing to say. And in real life, Hallie is not like that. Hallie plans out the things she says in her mind. She's very unsure of herself. She doesn't have the same confidence in herself. So she decides to get to know her online best friend better in real life. And secretly, Hallie's actually has a crush on Nash, who is the online best friend, but Nash has a crush on Kels, and Hallie decides to make Nash fall in love with the real her before revealing the secret. Obviously, a lot of things happen, and it goes crazy and it goes chaotic and it gets really messy. Our main character, Hallie, makes a lot of decisions that were really reckless and that ended up hurting a lot of her friends, especially her online friends, and it was really good to read. This book featured a lot of bookish references that were actually like real in this life. Like they talked about BookCon, they talked about Bookstagram. They used modern Twitter slang that I actually use and that I actually understand. It had the right amount of slang to make it relatable, and overall the story just sucks you in. What I didn't like about this book is that I felt that there could have been more dealing with the grief of losing a loved one and dealing with the aftermath of it and talking it out with your family. I also didn't appreciate that sometimes Hallie made a lot of selfish decisions for herself and her motivations were a little bit skewed. But overall, I still really enjoyed this book, and I gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This one actually comes out on April 7th, 2020, and I really recommend you to pick this one up because it's just so fluffy and so cute. So the next novel that I picked up is actually the audiobook of With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, and this book actually came out last year in May 2019. Lots of people were raving about Elizabeth and her books, and lots of people were talking about how this book was basically her first book that she wrote actual like writing, because she usually writes like slam poetry and she writes poetry in her novels. I didn't really like the audiobook of this one because the chapters were just so short and it was like told in like the past and the present. It's very confusing to follow a lot of the times. I figured that the character was a little bit too sassy for my liking sometimes, but she was very strong and she took care of herself, so that's what I appreciated. So this novel is about a teenage mom. I think she's just about to graduate high school, but she already has a daughter, and there's a lot of people who think poorly of her because she got pregnant at such a young age, but she doesn't care about that. She loves her daughter and she loves her family. What small family does she have? And she learns to take care of herself. There's a lot of cooking involved. It makes you hungry, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it as much as a lot of people, so I ended up only giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I thought sometimes it dragged a bit and it was kind of boring, so that's why. So the next novel that I picked up is actually another audiobook, and it's Sadie by Courtney Summers, and this one came out in 2018, so this one is not new. This one is blowing up on Instagram, or it did blow up on Instagram, and lots of people talked about this book. The audiobook is perfection. It's like a full casted audiobook, so lots of people, lots of different voices. They even put in like a lot of sound effects to make you feel like that you're actually listening to a real podcast and not the audiobook of this book. So Sadie is about a girl named Sadie who disappeared, and this podcast host who's trying to track down Sadie and trying to go through the history of Sadie in order to find where she is, because he is enlisted with the duty of finding Sadie and bringing her back into the town. This novel has a lot of trigger warnings. It includes a lot of things that are horrifying to read about, and that there's a lot of gore, there's a lot of sexual assaulting, there's pedophilia. It's just hard topics, and I highly don't recommend you to read this novel if you are not into those topics. This one's described as a YA thriller, and through the podcasts that we are listening and reading through, we learn more about her backstory. There's a lot of like past and present once again, and you're listening to her side of the story as well, and you hear about her rough upbringing with her mother's ex-boyfriends that were abusive towards her and her little sister. We also learn about her sister's fate and like things like that. I knew this novel would be dark, but I didn't realize that it would be so triggering and so dark. And I ended up like being very grossed out and very disgusted with a lot of parts of the podcasts. I feel like that's not a good judgment of like whether this book is good or not. But I feel like that this novel was marketed in a poor light. This one was marketed as a YA thriller, but from the different voices of different age groups of the characters, I feel like that this one should have been an adult thriller novel. I feel like this shouldn't be categorized as a YA novel just because Sadie is a young adult. Like, I just feel like this is just going to be very difficult for a lot of younger readers, and they should put like a lot more trigger warnings on it, and maybe like put like for ages like 15 and up or something like that. I ended up giving this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I kind of already knew the story like 70% in, so I didn't really need to listen to the other 30%. The ending was kind of left unsatisfactory, and I just didn't really care for it. So the next novel that I picked up is actually another audiobook, and it's Love and Gelato by Jenna Evans Welch, and this book takes place in Italy. Depending on when you watch this video, it's done in poor lighting because COVID-19 and Italy being like hit the most with COVID-19, it was very difficult to read this one because this one takes place in the summer, when before all that madness happened and before all the people who are suffering currently right now. So this one is a very kind of like a light heart novel, but it also dealt with a lot of deeper issues. We deal with a character who recently lost her mother to cancer. There's the before and there's the after, and her mother's dying wish for her is for her to go to Italy and figure out her roots and to find herself and discover herself. So she goes to Italy and she learns more about her mother. She finds a journal that her mother has written in, and there's like passages, and she's going on this grand adventure in Italy, touring with her friend that she met, and that is taking her to all these places so that she can figure out who her true father is. And it's all that mystery and it's all that intrigue. And when we finally figure out who the father is, there's like scenes of it that were very cruel and very hard to read and very like painful to read, and it felt really bad for the characters. So there's obviously obviously this one's not as fluffy as it sounds. There's obviously harder, deeper issues into it. Overall, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. It was cute, it was fluffy, it took me into a different place before all this madness happened. I liked it, and I actually read the second book in the series already, and I like that one as well. So I'm patiently waiting for the third book that's currently coming out in 2020 in the summer. So the last novel that I want to talk about is actually not a YA novel. It's actually a middle grade novel, and this year I've decided that I'm going to jump full force into middle grade and actually read middle grade novels, because sometimes I see it at bookstores and the covers are super cute and nobody can stop me. So this book is called Standup, Yume Chung by Jessica Kim, and this book is about a little girl a little girl, like she's 12 years old, so she's not that little, but she's little to me. So she wants to be a comedian, but she's also has the expectations from her Korean immigrant parents to study well in school, to go to university, and to have a proper profession, and definitely not to do in stand-up comedy. But she has her own dreams of telling jokes, becoming a YouTuber, and becoming like a stand-up comedy artist, and basically following the footsteps of the people that she watches on YouTube who does comedy. So this whole story is her journey of going into comedy camp and perfecting her stand-up and perfecting her jokes, but also talking about the hard difficulties immigrant life faces. It talked about her parents dealing with a failing restaurant in the Koreatown, and for them drumming up new business so that they can create a better life for their daughters who are born in America. And then it also talked about the older sister who had a lot of pressures on her to follow a set amount of rules. Her sister was very smart enough to graduate high school early and to actually go into med school at age 20. She goes through a lot of finding herself and following her dreams that her parents might not agree with, and it's also a lot of like the push back and forth. Overall, I enjoyed this novel. In the beginning, I didn't really like it. I thought it was kind of boring and I was waiting for things to pick up, but then more elements started following in and I kind of grew to like it. This book also featured a lot of BTS, so if anybody's a BTS fan, this book might be for you. Anyways, I really like this one, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but if it didn't have the sisters element into the story, I might not like it. Anyways, that is it for all the YA and middle grade novels that I read this past week. I actually left out a lot of books that I have read but I never talked about. We don't have time for that, and they're not of interest. Like, you wouldn't really care anyways. So hopefully you still enjoyed this video anyways. So hopefully you found some recommendations from this video, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. But until next time, I'll see you guys again. Bye.